You've likely heard that Australia was once a British penal colony. But what you might not know is that one of the most unusual voyages in its early history wasn't a ship full of dangerous men, but of women. In the spring of 1789, a ship set sail from England, bound for the convict colony of New South Wales. Her name was the Lady Juliana, and she was packed with over 200 female prisoners, petty thieves, pickpockets, and sex workers, chosen not just to serve their sentences, but to help civilize the struggling outpost on the other side of the world. The plan was as bold as it was bizarre. Send a shipload of women to a penal colony filled with men, in the hopes of encouraging marriage, morality, and stable family life. Colonial officials believed this would improve the colony's behavior and maybe even save it from collapse. But what actually happened aboard the Lady Juliana was far more complicated and far more human than any bureaucratic plan could predict. This wasn't just a prison ship. It was something stranger, a floating world of tragedy, survival, and love. As the women boarded the vessel at London's docks, they had no idea that the journey ahead would span nearly a year and take them from disease-ridden prisons to the open seas, foreign ports, and an uncertain future. The voyage was longer than most transoceanic trips of the day. 11 months of stops, storms, labor, and negotiation. At every port, from the sugar shores of Rio de Janeiro to the rugged coast of Cape Town, the women aboard the Lady Juliana adapted in ways that were as shocking to some as they were ingenious. And this was no ordinary prison voyage. The Lady Juliana would soon gain a reputation that scandalized the empire and reshaped a continent. The ship creaked and groaned as it pulled away from the English coast, carrying its unusual cargo. 226 convicted women, many sentenced for nothing more than stealing food, cloth, or coins to survive. Below deck, space was tight. The women were crowded into dark, damp quarters meant more for livestock than human life. Hammocks swayed, rats scurried, and disease was always close. But the mood aboard the Lady Juliana was unlike other convict ships. The crew, instead of enforcing strict, brutal discipline, often mingled freely with the prisoners. Relationships, both real and transactional, quickly took shape. In the words of one observer, the ship became a floating brothel. Women who had learned to survive on the streets of London now used those same skills to negotiate protection, favors, and better rations. It wasn't dignified, but for many, it was the difference between life and death. And despite the scandal this would cause later in London, the truth is, many of the women were better fed, better treated, and safer on the Lady Juliana than they had been in Britain's overcrowded jails. That's because the ship's commander, Lieutenant Thomas Edgar, wasn't a typical hardliner. He had once sailed with Captain Cook, and he ran his ship with surprising tolerance. Rather than crush the social order that emerged among the women and crew, he let it evolve. The women even sewed, sang, and staged small entertainments. Yet life wasn't easy. Supplies were tight. Illness crept in during long stretches at sea. The smell of salt, sweat, and bilge water hung in the air. But there was resilience, too, an odd, makeshift sense of community. From the outside, it looked like chaos. But for the women trapped aboard, this messy, floating micro-society was their chance to assert control over lives that had so often been controlled by others. Ahead lay thousands of miles of open ocean. But for now, aboard the Lady Juliana, a strange kind of order was taking hold, built not by law, but by necessity. As Lady Juliana sailed southward, the ship made its first major stop, Tenerife, one of the Canary Islands. It was a tropical world far removed from the fog and filth of England. Palms swayed, the sea shimmered, and the women, many seasick and sun-starved, finally glimpsed land again. Here, the women bartered small crafts, trinkets, and even themselves for fruit, fresh meat, and news. The crew welcomed the break, and so did the women, but rumors swirled among British merchants docked nearby. What kind of convict ship allowed such freedom? Then came Rio de Janeiro. The air was thick with heat and spices. The harbor bustled with ships from every corner of the world. The Lady Juliana anchored alongside traders and slavers. Local officials raised eyebrows at the unusual arrangements on board. Women laughing, sunbathing on deck, even flirting with officers. The scene defied every expectation of a prison ship. Some women, now visibly pregnant, were hidden below. Others boldly paraded in dresses traded from locals or officers. The British consul in Rio called it a disgrace. He demanded Lieutenant Edgar enforce order. But Edgar, pragmatic as ever, ignored the outcry. His women were healthy. His ship ran smoothly. That, he believed, was enough. The ship lingered longer than expected, partly due to illness and partly because fresh provisions took time. But not every interaction was peaceful. One officer was reprimanded after violently disciplining a woman. Another woman was briefly imprisoned on shore for causing scandal. Still, the women proved resourceful. They traded lace for eggs, sang for sailors. Some even learned a few Portuguese words. For most, this was the first time they'd ever seen the world beyond England's shores. Then came Cape Town, another vital stop, another round of shocked port officials. By now, word of the Lady Juliana had begun to spread. A convict ship run by women? A floating brothel with more laughter than lashings? What began as a logistical stopover was becoming something more, a myth in the making. But the Indian Ocean was vast and merciless. With half a world still ahead, storms were brewing. The Lady Juliana left Cape Town behind with sails full and spirits high. But now came the hardest part, the long, desolate crossing of the Indian Ocean toward New South Wales. Thousands of miles of open sea. No more ports, no more refuge, just wind, waves, and the unknown. It was the heart of winter in the southern hemisphere. The ocean turned cold and brooding. Gales howled through the rigging. Rain slicked the decks. And for the first time, the women felt truly alone. Not just imprisoned by walls, but by water. Some grew ill. The food, though better than other transports, began to spoil. Salt beef turned sour. Biscuits crumbled with weevils. Rats reappeared in the hold. And still, the sea rolled on, day after day, night after night. Then the storms came. Giant waves pounded the ship. The Lady Juliana creaked, strained, and groaned under the weight of the sea. Buckets were kept ready to bail out leaks. One mast cracked and had to be repaired mid-ocean. In the darkness, prayers were whispered below deck. Yet the women endured. Some found routine, mending clothes, braiding hair, writing letters that would never be sent. They told stories of London, of lost children, of crimes both petty and misunderstood. There was laughter, too. Songs passed the time. Births and deaths came quietly. One child born, two buried at sea. By now, several women were visibly pregnant from earlier arrangements with officers or crew. There was no punishment, just a resigned silence. Life aboard had blurred every line, between prisoner and passenger, between punishment and survival. Even Lieutenant Edgar, once indifferent, began keeping a quiet vigil. He knew his ship was unlike any other in the fleet. He knew the eyes of the world, and the authorities, would be watching when they arrived. And finally, after 10 months at sea, the outline of land appeared. It was May 6th, 1790. Lady Juliana dropped anchor in Sydney Cove. What she found there would shock everyone on board. May 6th, 1790. After 309 days at sea, the Lady Juliana entered Sydney Cove. The sails hung limp. The women gathered on deck, blinking into the harsh sunlight of this strange new world. But there was no warm welcome. The colony was starving. They had arrived not to relief, but to chaos. Just months earlier, the supply ship Guardian had wrecked. The settlers at Sydney were rationing crumbs. Marines were gaunt. Convicts were weak with hunger. Crops had failed. No ship was expected. And now here came a vessel full of women. They were met with disbelief. Governor Philip was furious. He had pleaded for farmers, tools, and food, not a floating prison of desperate women. Some officers called it the floating brothel. Others saw opportunity. Many of the Lady Juliana's women were taken ashore and absorbed into the settlement, some forced, others eager for stability. And yet, in time, these women helped save the colony. Within weeks, they were working, nursing, farming, raising children. Many married. Some reunited with men from earlier transports. They bore the first generation of children born in Australia, the future of the fledgling nation. Of the 226 convicts who boarded in 1789, over 200 survived, an astonishing success compared to other transports. Only 5 or 6 died, thanks to good food, fresh air, and above all, a surgeon who cared. But history was less kind. For centuries, the Lady Juliana was ridiculed, dismissed as a scandal, a joke, even an embarrassment. Yet those women endured not only prison, poverty, and violence, but also the longest convict voyage in history. They were not heroes. They were human. And their survival, their tenacity, helped shape a continent. The Lady Juliana would eventually sail home, but her mark on Australia never left. Some of those women lived long lives in the colony. Others disappeared into history. But for a moment, they were together, adrift between empires, carrying not just shame, but the seeds of something new.
Thank you so much for watching this journey with us. If you enjoyed the story of the Lady Juliana, please consider giving this video a like. It really helps more people discover our channel. And if you'd like to see more tales from history and mythology, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you again for your time, and if you're curious for more, just click the video on your screen now. Another story is waiting.